Learning about multiculturalism this semester has impacted the way I see the world today. When being asked to define multiculturalism at the beginning of the semester, I remember looking up a definition and changing it into my own words, not really knowing what multiculturalism meant. For my definition, I wrote, multiculturalism is the view that different cultures, races, and ethnicities, especially minorities, deserve to have equal rights and opportunities compared to the dominant race. Looking back now, I'm finally unable to fully understand what I had written that day when asked to define it. Multiculturalism is such a big part of what makes up the world today, and something I had briefly thought about but never fully dived into how much of an effect it can have. Throughout the course, I was able to learn more about the true meaning of multiculturalism and let it influence me in many ways. One of the first things that influenced me was the relationship between race and photography, as it was one that never really occurred to me. Reading The Shadow and the System by Nicholas Marsoff unquestionably altered my understanding and idea of how the relationship between racism and photography is one that is still prevalent today. Photography today is used to push radically biased notions. A more modern example of the relationship between racism and photography today is the Star Wars The Force Awakens movie poster. In the version released in the United States, actor John Boyega is very prominent on the right side of the poster as he is one of the main characters in the movie. Yet in the version released in China, he has been shrunk down and moved down towards the bottom of the poster. China deliberately downplays the character of color, even if the character itself plays a major role in the movie. It is interesting how even today, racism and photography can still have a negative relationship. The second thing that influenced how I see multiculturalism is learning about the topic of whiteness. McIntosh's white privilege checklist showed me just how the simplest things that many white people take for granted can be an imposition for people of color. For example, McIntosh states, I can be pretty sure that if I ask to talk to the person in charge, I will be facing a person of my race. As someone who has worked in retail, I can acknowledge that this is something very common. None of my managers were someone of color, in fact they were all white. Which leads to another of McIntosh's point on her list. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. More often than not, when people of color came into the store I worked at, they were immediately being watched by security. It was very rare when you saw security following someone who was white. Many people neglect the fact that white privilege is still something that exists today. Yet when I learned about this term, I was able to apply it several times into my daily routine. McIntosh's white privilege checklist opened my eyes to what it means to be white in America. Included is a comic strip by Dixon Diaz that I thought was interesting and talks a little bit more about white privilege. Another thing that influenced me was Kiri Davis' video, A Girl Like Me. Kiri Davis' video touches base on how stereotypes can affect the way one perceives themselves. In her video, many girls of color criticized the way they looked. Many believed they had to have lighter skin color or had to always have their hair done in order to be considered beautiful by society. Women of color are constantly being told by the media that they have to look a certain way or dress a certain way in order to fit the mold of the term beautiful. This can leave African American women to develop lower self-confidence because of the color of their skin. Because of this video, I chose to focus on #BlackGirlMagic for one of my Tumblr posts. This social media hashtag was created to empower women of color to ignore the negative stereotypes the media can sometimes portray and give them the confidence to feel beautiful in their own skin. Everything we learned this semester is connected. While in an ideal world, multiculturalism would exist every day, that is not the case. Racism is still very prominent in today's society. While not as noticeable as before, it is still something people of color have to deal with. Multiculturalism is something we as a community should strive for, as it can change the way we shape the world in the future.